exploring true crime, mysteries, and legends from around the world.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm your host, and today we are back at it again with another episode of the Top 5 Weirdest True Crimes You've Never Heard of. So buckle up, make sure you're not driving because you won't be able to afterwards, and let's get weird. We'll start off this week's episode with number 5, the Sleepwalking Killer. In 1987, a man from the UK named Kenneth Parks got in his car and drove 14 miles to his in-laws' house. Now, that might not sound too strange, but here's where it gets weird. When he arrived at the house, he viciously attacked his mother-in-law, bludgeoning her to death with a lead pipe. But the craziest part is when he then promptly called the police and turned himself in. Oh, and also he was still sleepwalking when he did all of this. It turns out Kenneth had been sleepwalking and had no memory of the attack. A court in Canada later ruled that Kenneth was acquitted due to what is known as non-insane automatism. Basically, the court decided that since Kenneth wasn't technically insane, but rather was sleepwalking and therefore not in control of his actions, he couldn't be guilty of murder. Talk about being set free on a technicality. Next up, we have number 4, the sausage poisoner of Nuremberg. During the late 1700s in Germany, there lived a butcher who had an unusual hobby, poisoning sausages. Seriously, this guy deliberately laced sausages sold at Nuremberg markets with toxic substances, killing dozens of people and making hundreds more sick. People began to panic and rumors spread quickly through the town. Authorities eventually caught on to the fact that the butcher was the one putting poison in the sausages. They brought him to trial, and he confessed to everything. Turns out he simply hated the taste of nutmeg and wanted it removed from the sausages he made. When people complained that the sausages tasted bad, he took it out on them, literally. After he confessed, authorities took swift action to prevent further deaths and passed some of Europe's first food safety reforms. That, and the fact that the man had confessed, is likely why he never ended up behind bars for his crimes. The name of this toxic butcher has been lost to history, but the nickname given to this case, Wurstgiftmischer, meaning sausage poisoner in German, remains. Coming in at number 3, we have the case of the stolen Einstein brain. In 1955, Albert Einstein died at the age of 76. At the time, he was an internationally recognized genius, and the world was understandably curious about his brain. So, when pathologist Dr. Thomas Harvey performed his autopsy, he saw an opportunity. Without telling anyone, he removed Einstein's brain and hid it in a jar. Over the next few decades, he would slice up portions of the brain and send them to various researchers around the world. None of them were ever able to find anything particularly special about it. Eventually, in the 1990s, the full story of the missing brain came out. Not only had Harvey stolen Einstein's brain, but he'd also been keeping it all those years. It's unclear why he did it, but thankfully he was finally caught and the brain could be returned to Einstein's family for a proper burial. And now we have number 2, the cursed Sapphire heist. In the early 1980s, thieves broke into a museum and stole a large purple sapphire that had been donated to the museum. The gem, which had been called the Delhi Purple Sapphire, was said to be cursed. According to legend, whoever owned the sapphire would meet with certain ruin. Before the theft, several accidents and misfortunes had reportedly befallen the museum, and soon after the sapphire was stolen, the thief who had broken in, Michael Collins, was killed by a taxi on his way back from the museum. Many believed that the sapphire was cursed and that its curse was claiming yet another life. Finally, we have reached our number 1 spot. And coming in at number 1, we have the man who stole his own corpse. In the 1930s, a man named Elmer McCurdy tried to rob a train. Things didn't go according to plan, and he was shot by the police. After being pronounced dead, he was embalmed and his body was put on display in a funeral home. Sometime later, the body was taken over by a traveling carnival and put on display in their sideshow. For decades, people paid to come see the mummified body of the man who had once tried to rob a train. The only problem was that Elmer wasn't actually dead. Sure, he'd been shot and thought to be dead, but he'd actually only been in a coma. Somehow, nobody noticed that he was alive as they paraded his body around the country, showing it off like some kind of freak show exhibit. In 1976, he was finally discovered in a California funhouse. He had regained consciousness years ago and had simply been living in the walls of the funhouse, surviving off the fat of the land and eating whatever scraps he could find. Yeah, somehow, this dude survived like that for decades. Like what? How? Anyway, after being discovered, he was taken to the hospital and treated for his injuries. Unfortunately, he suffered from severe dementia, likely due to the lack of oxygen to his brain while in a coma. He spent his last years in a Wisconsin institution until his eventual death in 1990. He was finally laid to rest, 54 years after his original death and 61 years after he was first embalmed. What a strange and crazy story.
Thanks for watching Tales Beyond Borders. Subscribe for more true crime mysteries and chilling stories you won't hear anywhere else.